асфальт до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше швидко. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до Волновахи і чудно кличе дітей нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим лидерским мечом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до Волновахи і чудно кличе дітей нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до Волновахи і чудно кличе дітей нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до Волновахи і чудно кличе дітей нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Ті, хто воде всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to days 124 and 125 of the news. And tonight we have some big news, good and bad, unfortunately, so stay tuned.
We have a massive news all around the country tonight. Over the past 48 hours, some of the largest developments of this war, both good and bad, like Matthew said, have unfolded across Ukraine and around the world. But we are, of course, obligated to cover every little bit of this news, and so regardless whether it's good, bad, pretty, or ugly, we're going to be covering it as detailed as possible. Now, with that being said, let's get into the schedule for tonight's news. We're going to be starting off inside of... Well, actually, we're going to do a little bit of a switch. We're actually going to start off down in Turkey. For those of y'all who don't know, this has been a little bit of a big deal today, but we'll be covering the Turkish news first. After that, we'll then be moving to Kyiv and covering the Kyiv news, and after we cover the Kyiv news, we'll then be moving to the capital of Moscow in Russia. We'll then be covering the major news there, and then we'll also be moving up to the St. Petersburg news before we start heading down to Kremenchuk. Once we cover all of that news, we're going to start moving to our location unknowns and Kharkiv news, but before we get there, we're of course going to answer 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then cover the location unknowns and the Kharkiv area. After that, we'll then start moving into the northern Donbass and the rest of the news from around the country. But before we get there, of course, we're going to answer another 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on to the remainder of the news for the night and the speech from President Zelensky, bringing us full circle back to Kyiv. Now, we have some of the craziest news tonight to share with y'all. And a lot of people thought this was never going to happen. And a lot of people had started to grow a lot of resentment against the Turks for what they have been doing so far. And just for those of y'all who do not know, the Turks were not allowing the Swedes and the Finns to enter NATO. We actually colloquially on this channel called them Swedeland because they were both in the same boat with what was going on for them. And the only thing holding them back from NATO membership was the Turks. And the Turks were sitting there and saying, no, we're not going to let them in. Now, the reason why they were saying that is still a little unclear. We don't know exactly why they were doing that or saying that. But as of today, I wasn't able to get a news bulletin for this, but Turkey now has no objections, and they've been given the green light to let Sweden and Finland into NATO. That was the only country that was opposing their entrance into the NATO alliance, and now today that opposition has been cleared, and Sweden and Finland will most likely become inevitable members of the NATO alliance, thus strengthening NATO's claims over the Scandinavian area of Europe, and also ensuring that NATO will have supremacy over the Russians. And so in anticipation for Finland actually becoming a member of NATO, we are now going to turn this light blue line indicating a possible NATO front line to blue, indicating that it is now, in fact, a NATO front line. Of course, as far as we know on this channel, we haven't gotten any confirmation that Finland and Sweden are in NATO yet, but the roadblocks have been cleared, and so they should be joining within the next few days. Great news, really. I'm trying to come up with a wordage for this, but this is incredible news. This means that, by and large, the Russians have now screwed themselves over. Because here was the whole principle behind the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war was to stop the Russians from sharing a longer front line with NATO. Now they're sharing a longer front line in Finland. I believe if we were able to whip out a ruler here, which we will, I believe this length of front line here is actually considerably longer than the front line they would have shared with the Ukraine. But let me just get out a ruler here and measure this, and we'll see. Because I'm actually interested myself if that is the case. So we're going to keep on, and this is going to be a rough approximation. Don't take this as a perfect measurement. But let's see, 500. We'll round that corner there. Try and get the best figure we can. And looks like this front line here with Finland is 748 miles. Now, if we were to cut Belarus out of the picture and we were to measure the border that Russia shares with Ukraine, let's get a comparison of how long the NATO front line in Finland is now compared to the ones that the Russians didn't want with Ukraine. So we were already at 110, 150, 180. And once again, this has more turns and corners in it. And so this may be kind of making the front line a little bit longer than it is. But they are literally equal. If you were to cut Belarus out of this picture, the front lines that Finland and Ukraine share with the Russian border are literally equal in length. Just Ukraine is just short by about 6 miles. And so now the Russians have screwed themselves over strategically, because on top of Finland now joining NATO, it's very possible that at the end of this war, the Russians and the Ukrainians will sign some kind of a white peace. And then the Ukrainians in the future may join NATO, now making Russia literally entirely surrounded on its western border by NATO countries. This is going to be bad news for them. Great news for us, though. And I have to say that this is some of the best news we have heard out of this war so far. Now, the question that everyone's going to be posing now, especially the Finns, are going to be, are we now going to go to war with Russia? The answer is a little bit complicated. Now that they're a NATO member, well, now that they will be a NATO member, they're not one yet, I have to make that clear, they're going to have Article 5 protections, and so if they are invaded by the Russians, every NATO country in the alliance is going to have to treat it as an attack upon itself, and so now pretty much the entirety of Europe is going to be going to war with Russia all in one fell swoop. So I don't think they're going to be invading Finland if they get NATO membership now, and considering that they're already going through the process of getting there, I don't think the Russians will be invading them. Now they're just going to be sharing a 750-mile-long extra front line with NATO, which is going to cause them a lot of headaches. And this also puts St. Petersburg in striking distance of not just one front line, but 2 front lines. And so there's the possibility, much like in World War II, that if a conventional war was to break out in between Russia and the West, St. Petersburg might get surrounded and end up in a siege of Leningrad kind of situation like it did in World War II. So that's kind of a little crazy, actually. So with that, we're now going to move out of the Istanbul area and the incredible news we got from there, and we're now going to move into Kyiv. We've gotten a couple of bits of news from Kyiv today. Both of them have been pretty interesting. Starting off, we actually saw that the police in Ukraine, well, specifically Kyiv, were ensuring that people were respecting the curfew and arresting people who were found out after night after the curfew. Curfews are crucially important during wartime. They ensure that non-essential like citizens are off the streets, so that way they're not put in any danger, and it also cuts down on the amount of sabotage and spy operations that can be conducted, because usually clandestine things happen at night. You know, that's like the old saying, the freaks come out at night, and that's pretty true for the most part. We now see the police making sure that the curfews are being respected. Have cop cars roaming the streets, and a lot of people may be saying, wow, this is really restricting, this seems very draconian. But one thing that everyone does have to remember is that during wartime, usually a lot of rights disappear, and while that sounds very aloof, honestly, historically that's just the precedent. And in the United States in the Civil War, it was famously known that Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus, and so you could pretty much keep Confederate prisoners or anyone who was a Southern sympathizer in prison almost indefinitely through the course of the war, and not really have to put them in a trial to see if they're guilty or not. So, you know, it's kind of the precedent, but it's good to see that the Ukrainian police are ensuring that curfews are respected, because not only is it keeping people safe, but it's also cutting down the potential for sabotage attacks, and also really just in general spy operations to be conducted in the capital. Moving on to the next bit of news, we did see that more cruise missiles landed in the city of Kyiv on the day 124, which would have been Monday, and here's the video of the aftermath. We don't know how many people were killed in this missile attack, but considering that it did hit a residential building, it most likely killed several people. You can hear the next one coming in and exploding right there, and of course an incredibly unfortunate sight. And I do wish them the best of luck, because those people in Kyiv, while not on the front line now, do get bombarded pretty much whenever there's a large international event going on, and hopefully a lot of them are able to make it to safety, although those people unfortunately most likely didn't. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Russian news. We're now going to move out of Ukraine and into Russia, and we have gotten massive news that's showing that the Russian economy is falling apart. For the first time since 1918, unfortunately I don't have a link for this one as well, but for the first time since 1918, which, if y'all do not know, was pretty much when the Bolsheviks executed the Romanov dynasty and pretty much started the Soviet Union, in my terms. Really, it started in 1922, but since 1918, Russia has never defaulted on a single loan or a single debt. That all changed on day 124 of this war, when the Russians defaulted on their loans. This means, in practice, that the Russians are pretty much bankrupt, and they have so little money in, I guess you could say, their treasury, that they're not even able to pay off the basic, I guess you could say, interest on their debts that they've incurred. And so that's not good news for them. That's that thing that everyone's been talking about for quite some while and have been saying, oh, give it any minute now, the Russian economy is going to collapse. We're finally seeing it happen. It looks like it's going to happen a little bit slower than people expected, but still, the Russian economy is on the way out, and that is a great example of that very thing, because when you default on loans, that is huge. There's no way to get around that. They've defaulted on pretty much every single loan there is, because they've run out of money to pay for them. So great news to see, and hopefully we'll be getting more news about Russian economic collapse, which will end this war much sooner. And finally, we're going to move up to St. Petersburg, where today we saw that someone set a Russian church ablaze. It was a nice little church. It looked like a historical one, and so I hate to see it on fire, but then again, the Russians have burned down and destroyed multiple churches within Ukraine, so at this point it nearly seems like payback. So with that, that is the end of the video right there, and we can see that another Russian church, not really another one, but another historical Russian structure has caught on fire, and it does appear to be burning to the ground. As someone who's really into history, I hate to see stuff like this, because honestly, it's sad to see history being burned down, but then again, it's kind of happening both in Ukraine and Russia now, and so I just kind of have to chalk it up to, I guess this is what war is. With that, we're now going to start moving down towards Kremenchuk, but before we get there, we do have to cover one last bit of news from Kursk. Today we saw that there was an explosion at the Kursk airfield. We don't know what caused it or what it hit, but apparently it did cause some kind of damage to the Russian Air Force that was based there. Here's the video of the explosions. You see a nice little smoke plume out there and a couple of small explosions. And it's great to see. Of course, we don't have any information about what caused that. I'm not sure if it was a missile strike or some kind of a sabotage attack. Not entirely sure. But it does seem that it has caused some damage because there is an ongoing fire there. And we will hopefully get a little bit more information about what kind of damage was caused at the Kursk airfield. With that, we're now going to move on to one of the darker and sadder bits of news that we've gotten today in Kremenchuk. On day 124, a large mall with around 1,000 people in it inside of Kremenchuk was attacked by Russian cruise missiles. We actually got footage on day 124 from inside the mall moments after the attack occurred. Here's the video, and just out of respect of the scores of people who were killed, I'm not going to give any commentary. I'm just going to let y'all see the video. On day 125, which is today, we got more videos of the Kremenchuk attack, particularly from cameras around the area that we're filming. First, we can see on this footage here, if it loads, footage from a material yard that was nearby, which a lot of people were assuming was the actual target, as the cruise missiles landed just right outside of this area and then slammed into the mall. Here's the video. And now we're going to move on to the last video of this Kremenchuk attack, where we can see the mall hit by a missile from a different perspective. This one actually didn't see the attack, but it was looking at a park, and you could see the explosion occur right behind it. And so here's this video. You see the glow of the explosion, and now you can see the debris cloud flying upwards and loads of debris falling in the lake and around the trees as well. And when you see people here jogging around the park, this looks like it was before the explosion. The explosion occurred. This man hit the ground, and now he's jumping into the lake, it seems, and the lady is now running down the other way. This was one of the most heinous single attacks during the war on civilians. At the Kremenchuk railway station, some 50-something people were killed by a cruise missile strike on the railway station. Here in this attack, I believe the death count has risen to around 34, but right now the death count is still climbing as people die from their injuries after the attack. We don't know the specific number yet. We'll still try and keep up to date on that, but this may become one of the single most deadly attacks on civilians during this war, and certainly a war crime by the Russians, considering that it targeted a heavily populated mall that was not a military target whatsoever and was filled with civilians. And this was such a beautiful park. And honestly, this entire city looks incredibly beautiful, and it's largely been untouched by the war up till this point. You can see the explosion occur in the background there again. And now it's becoming the target of Russian missile attacks as well. And none of these people in this city ever believed that these attacks would become commonplace, but over the past week, we've started to see the Russians target Kremenchuk more and more with cruise missiles, and each time they are killing civilians. An incredibly unfortunate occurrence, and I do hope that the Russians make them pay for every single citizen that they killed inside of that mall, and the countless dozens, if not hundreds, of civilians that may have been injured. With that, we're now going to move out of Kremenchuk, and we're now going to be moving towards our location unknowns and the Kharkiv news. But before we get there, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on to the location unknowns and the Kharkiv segment. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so it is now time for the questions. And first up, we have a $35 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, what about the F-16s? How much retraining does a MiG-29 pilot need to fly one properly?
Ooh, that's a tough question. First, the Ukrainians do not have a MiG-21. The Romanians offered to give them MiG-21s, but the Ukrainian Air Force doesn't have any operational MiG-21s in it. They have MiG-29s and Su-27s. But, moving on from that, I think that speaking of F-16s, I don't think they'll be over there. We know by and large the United States isn't going to send any. But if they did make it over there, some Ukrainian pilots were trained in the United States before, years prior, on how to fly an F-16-like aircraft. And so we know that some of them do have the training to be able to fly them. So with that in mind, if they did get F-16s, those pilots, if they are still alive, maybe transferred over from the MiG-29s or the Su-27s and into the F-16s, and then there would really be no training involved. Probably just a brush-up course of about maybe a week, but beyond that, they would be flying and operational. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, but I would like to kind of like put the disclaimer on that one. I don't think the U.S. will be sending those kinds of aircraft over, but if they do, hopefully the pilots who were trained somewhat on the F-16s will be able to fly them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Kaltenberg, who says, Bayraktar.
Bayraktar. And I thank you so much for the support, Kaltenberg. I hope you enjoyed that little thing. And also, I've figured out how to roll the R's pretty well. So, you know, I can sit there and go Bayraktar and do it pretty well. At least I believe that. I may be wrong. But I do thank you so much for the support, Kaltenberg. And you, along with a lot of other viewers on our channel, help us to keep running. And we're greatly appreciative to every single one of y'all. And with that, we are on to the next question. And thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have our in-house Morse code decoder, WF2U, who puts in a $20 super chat and comes through with his impressive skills again, who says, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, the Morse code plain language message says, Ukraine may be in dark waters, but the dark waters must be crossed to make it to the safe ports of liberty.
And that is absolutely correct. You got it correct again. Ding, 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 ding. I tried to come up with something a little bit more refined and philosophical sounding tonight, so I hope that came off well to a lot of people. But I wanted to say something that was kind of reflective of the situation right now, which it looks like Ukraine may be entering the second darkest time in this war since the Battle of Kyiv, which was also a very nerve-wracking and scary time. But with that, you did get it correct, and I congratulate you again. You are the in-house Morse code translator here, and I hope a lot of people know that you're that guy on this stream. And so I thank you so much once again for the support, and I thank you for cracking the code. We're going to have to start putting this stuff through the Enigma machine so that way you can't get it that quickly. But with that, we have now reached the end of this question segment. We're now going to move on to the location unknowns of day 124 and day 125. And then after that, we'll move on to our Kharkiv segment. And then we'll move on to our northern Donbass and the rest of the front lines. But before we do that, we'll answer another 3 questions from the chat. If you have sent in a super chat, or if you're going to send in one, do not worry. We do answer every single one of them by the end of the night. And if you would like to ask a question, you don't always have to put in a super chat to get your question answered. All you have to do is put @Enforcer or @EnforcerMatt in your message and then type out the question, and Matthew will see it, and it may be one of the questions that's picked to be answered at the end of the stream. And so with that, we're now going to move out of the Kremenchuk news and that question segment, and we're now going to move into the location unknowns, starting off on day 124. On day 124, we saw a Russian helicopter get shot down by a Ukrainian anti-aircraft team using a Marlet. We're actually going to go to Twitter to watch this, so that way we don't get a black screen, just in case. So, here's the video. You can see him fire the anti-aircraft missile, I guess you could say. We can see the Russian helicopter right there. It's that little black speck off in the distance. We see it still flying. And it got hit.
Попал!
Попав!
And it's now spinning. We can kind of see it spinning up there a little bit.
Попав же ж?
Попав, але вона йде на зниження.
Now it's heading towards the ground. Of course, the crew celebrated. And we gotta wait for that little smoke plume just to make sure it went down. Hopefully we can see it. Come on.
Попав, зараз подивимося, буде дим.
Come on, show it to us.
Да.
We didn't see the smoke plume, but we could hear the explosion of the helicopter slamming into the ground out there, which lets us know that that was a Russian helicopter that was taken out on film, day 125 of the war, and the pilots were flying it like idiots. Neither side at this point, when we zoom in, flies a helicopter that high up above the ground. That's at least 500 feet up. Usually they fly at treetop level and they only come up in very little to fire off unguided rockets. This Russian helicopter was flying so high above the ground that it's almost like it's coming in for a landing at Heathrow Airport, but it got slammed by a marlet, and I think the pilot's last thoughts were, oh crap, we screwed up, we should have been a little bit lower to the ground. So, another claim for the Ukrainians on Russian helicopter casualties, and now the Russians are probably going to start hurting for helicopters as well, because when we did the last amount of figuring and number crunching to figure out how many helicopters do the Russians have left, they have lost 1 in every 4 of their helicopters at this point, and if the war continues on with stuff like this happening, they're probably going to come out of the war with only half of their helicopters remaining. But once again, incredible news, and it's a great way to start off our location unknowns. Moving on to our next bit of news, we finally saw it here on the channel. Call your kids, call your family. A lot of people were saying the Panzerhaubitze 2000 had arrived, and I said we didn't have video or picture evidence of them being in Ukraine, so I couldn't confirm it. But on day 124, we finally got that confirmation as we saw a video of a Panzerhaubitze 2000 amongst the trees covered in foliage, and it's finally here, the Panzerhaubitze 2000. One of the fastest reloading SPGs in the Western world used by NATO, and probably one of the most highly anticipated SPGs to be sent to Ukraine. Just for y'all to know, we will pull this one up. The PZH 2000. The Panzerhaubitze 2000 is the German SPG. There's only, let me make sure I get this correct. Wow, they don't give a number. We don't know how many of these things there are actually based off of the Wikipedia page, but this is one of the fastest reloading SPG systems in the Western world. It's one of the furthest range as well. I believe that the range, if we check, is... golly! Wow, that is something. This thing has a range of, with standard ammunition, 22 miles, with slightly improved ammunition, 29 miles, and then with RAP ammunition, which I'm sure the Ukrainians probably didn't get, it's got a 42-mile range. Now, this is a heavy-hitting SPG, and especially since it uses the 155... Wait, no, I'm sorry. Let me make sure. I want to make sure I'm correct with that. Yeah, it uses the 155 millimeter gun, which is the standard NATO caliber for SPGs and towed artillery pieces. This thing is going to be knocking it out of the park. And so once again, great news to see that the Panzerhaubitze 2000 has arrived, and hopefully we will be seeing it knocking out Russian vehicles soon. With that, we're now going to move on to the day 124 news, where we can then see Russian tanks clearing a minefield. And I have to say that their minefield clearing strategy is a little simple, but it does work. And of course, we got to mute it. It does have copyrighted music. When you see the Russian tanks rolling through the fields here, unsuspecting and unaware of their impending fate. And they keep on rolling, but their fate will be sealed very soon, because what they don't know is that they're driving through a minefield. As usual, going full speed. And there we have it. Hit a mine. That tank has been knocked out, most likely. We haven't seen any of the crew bail yet, either. It appears that they're still inside the tank. We don't see the other tank behind it now. We can see it kind of slowing down a little bit. Now it's going to veer off the tracks made by the other tank, which is not a smart idea, considering that one just ran into a mine. And now it's well on fire. We don't know if the crew bailed. We haven't seen them bail out. But the tank is on fire and it has been destroyed. Oh, man. And, you know, there's a perfectly good road right here that you could have seen the mines on, really. Because, you know, there's no way to hide a mine all too well on a road. And that's the end of the video, but another Russian tank wiped out, somewhat from its own stupidity. Blowing through a field at top speed when you don't even know if there's mines there or not is a generally unsafe strategy. And when you see the Russians there, once again exhibiting the maximum amount of intelligence that the average Russian usually has. With that, we're now going to move on to the day 125 location unknown news, where the good videos continue. First, we can see Ukrainian artillery pounding the Russian forces in an unknown location. Of course, it is the location unknown segment. But it looks like they were hitting them with MLRSs, and good lord, they lit up the side of this hill.
Ебать, просто ебать.
quite a little barrage there. I'm sure that there were a couple of Russians that came out of that. Of course, with MLRSs, everyone could have come out of that, or no one could have come out of that. It's really hard to tell, but that was one hell of a barrage by the Ukrainian artillery. Moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, we can see the Ukrainians once again spreading crabs, a trend that's become normal amongst the Ukrainians. Here we can see the crab, and there it's giving crabs. Ukrainians really need to start registering for crabs tests. It seems like they keep on getting more and more crabs, and that's just not healthy for anyone. And now it looks like they're even spreading it to, I guess you could say, their involuntary partners, the Russians. And so hopefully they can get this all sorted out, because getting crabs is never fun. But in all seriousness, it's good to see that the Polish SPGs are over there and knocking out Russian units as well, hopefully, although we didn't see that on that video. Moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, we've seen Russian Su-25s face down a Ukrainian anti-air team and just manage in the video to escape by the skin of their teeth, but the Ukrainians gave them a good run for their money. And so, here's the video. You see the the Russian Su-25s in the distance, popping flares. We can hear the anti-air equipment spooling up, and we have a Stinger here, and what appears to be a Piorin here. I might be wrong with that. That might actually be some kind of a Russian anti-air system like a Strelka, but we have two different anti-air systems here. And they're just waiting for their moment. Su-25s are still out there, right in distance, and we can hear the anti-air missiles being fired, it sounds. And I'm trying to follow the dot, but it's so hard to see. Sadly, we didn't see the hit. I think that the Su-25s managed to evade the shot, otherwise we most likely would have seen them go down. But a good try by the Ukrainian AA teams, and what a perfect position on top of this hill, overlooking miles of land. There's really no way that those Su-25s could hide from the Stingers, because they were so high up on a hill. Still, it looks like they managed to escape, but hopefully, next time, the Ukrainians will be a little bit luckier. With that, we're now going to move on to our last bit of Ukrainian location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainian version of a snatch and grab. A lot of my American viewers may be used to the now popular snatch and grab strategy when committing a crime. Snatch and grabs in the United States usually consist of someone, well, a group of people, running into a store, snatching everything they can, and then running away with it. The Ukrainians have now adopted the snatch and grab strategy as well, but they're doing it in the middle of a firefight, and not only is it in the middle of the firefight, but they're not stealing Louis Vuitton bags, they're actually stealing a BMD-4. Kind of a wild video, honestly, because this is literally in the middle of a firefight. This T-64 barrels its way out of the fight to this abandoned BMD, rolls up in front of it, and the Ukrainians are already trying, in the middle of the firefight, to hook that thing up to the T-64. We can now see the T-64 firing into the distance as it's still getting connected to tow away the BMD. The firefight's still going on. Looks like the video blacked out. Huh. That's kind of sad. For some reason earlier it did show it tugging it away, but now that part of the video is black. I don't know if that was re-uploaded and they took that part out or what, but in the actual video I saw, that thing got dragged away. So sadly, y'all didn't see that part. But what a snatch and grab. Literally in the middle of a firefight, still firing at the Russians in the distance. They're trying to hook up a BMD-4 and tow it off the field. Now, that is dedication, and I hope that they were able to get both the T-64 and the BMD out of the field intact, because that means that the Ukrainians now have a fully functioning, perfectly operational BMD-4 that they could give to an infantry unit that needs one. So some pretty good location unknown news today, and now we're going to move into Kharkiv, where we've gotten some more good news and a little bit of bad news as well. Starting off on the front lines with the good news before we get to the bad news, we can see in this video the Ukrainians, pretty much every single brigade that's near the Kharkiv salient, cooperated today with each other to wipe out the Russians the best they can. And so here's the video. See the Russian forces moving along that road, and the first artillery shell came in and exploded, and it looks like it may have hit something like ammunition, because that's not a typical Ukrainian artillery shell explosion. Can't really tell you that for sure. It's really hard to tell. We can now see what appears to be a Russian vehicle burning in a tree line.
Там взрывается, видишь? Опа.
Toasty, as a lot of people love to hear. You can see another Russian vehicle burning in the city. It's always good to see Russian vehicles burning. It's one less Russian unit that can, of course, kill Ukrainian civilians, push back the Ukrainian military, and just cause general havoc. And so it's good to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock out a couple of more Russian units there in the Kharkiv salient. Moving down to the city, we did see that at night on day 125 in Kharkiv, there were more massive explosions in the city, showing that the Russians are still attempting to bombard Kharkiv into submission, although it's not even near the front lines anymore. There's the fireball from one of the explosions, and the video just went out. Maybe, if I go here, I can actually go and watch the video, so give me just a second. We're going to scroll down to this one. This is actually fair enough, and this looks closer to the explosion actually, but this is the same bombardment that was in the last video that occurred in Kharkiv.
Тихо, тихо, тихо.
Quite a massive explosion. We don't know what it hit, but based off the explosion, it may have hit a military target, like an ammunition depot. Not entirely sure what it hit. Once again, that's an assumption on my end. But based off of watching 125 days of videos and the kinds of explosions that are caused by certain things being hit, that does seem like it was most likely an ammunition depot, or it could have just been a Russian cruise missile that has a high explosive yield for some reason that exploded and created the fireball we saw in the video. But with that, we're now going to move out of Kharkiv, and we're now going to move down to the northern Donbass and the rest of the news from around the front. But before we get there into some of the bad news today, actually it's the worst news we've got, we're now going to answer another 3 questions from the chat and then move on to the rest of the news. So stick around. Make sure to stick around for this one, because this is the big news that is, of course, in the title for the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and yes, please definitely stay tuned, because you're not going to miss what's coming up next. So, first up in this question segment, we have a $40 super chat from Praise Adonai, also known as Bob the Viking, who says, Enforcer and Matt, can you please explain how important it is to Europe and the rest of the world it is for Ukraine to win the war? Y'all are doing a great service for the war effort and drawing attention to Ukraine's needs and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the kind words, Bob the Viking. I want to make sure to call you Bob because that's what you want to be called. But I thank you so much for the kind words, and also Slava Ukraini. And now to answer that question, the reason why it's important for Ukraine to win this war and remain pretty much a sovereign, self-determining country is because the Russians, specifically Putin, has already laid out his principle that this is just a start. Just like Hitler wrote Mein Kampf and said that they were going to, of course, annex Austria first and then go for the Czechs and the Poles and then expand out into the Soviet Union for Lebensraum. Putin has already made it clear that Ukraine is just the first stepping stone in trying to reunite the Russian Empire in a way. He wants to retake the Baltic states and also parts of Poland to literally reform the Russian Empire as far as we know. And so if the Ukrainians were to lose, and were to lose due to a lack of support on our end, that would open up the gateway for Russia to say maybe NATO wouldn't respond if we invaded the Baltic states, because they didn't respond to anything that happened in Ukraine. So it's very important for us to help the Ukrainians win the war, to be able to first weaken the Russians to the point that they wouldn't be able to pursue a second war anywhere, and second, so that way the Ukrainians don't fall, and then, a domino effect may occur. And the domino effect, of course, is something that existed during the Cold War. By and large, we found out that the domino effect there was somewhat true, but not really. But in this case, it does seem to be entirely true, because they've literally stated the countries they want to go after, much like Hitler stated the countries that he was going to go after in Mein Kampf. So for those reasons, just on the simple, surface level explanation, that's the important reason why Ukraine has to win. If Ukraine falls, the rest of Eastern Europe may fall to the Russians. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support, Praise Adonai. It helps out our channel a good deal and helps us to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $25 super chat from Sylvester the Cat, who says, when the U.S. sent the MLRS systems, did we degrade their accuracy like we did with the M777's Leaf Spring tanker?
Well, I thank you for the support, and I don't really know about that. You see, I've noticed that a lot of things being sent over by NATO, a lot of people are saying that they're missing this and they're missing that, and they're missing critical systems that make them incredibly accurate. Usually it's some kind of a computer targeting system. But the thing is that at this point, I've heard that so many times, I'm not really sure if that's true or not. And considering that we have seen Ukrainian M777s score hits on Russian targets almost at their maximum range with precision accuracy, I'm not really sure if that's true or not. I think that may honestly be some kind of a ploy or a ruse by the West to make the Russians think that these systems aren't going to be as potent as they're supposed to be. But at the same time, we've never seen the Ukrainians lacking in terms of firepower with these things. In fact, they boast that their accuracy is far beyond the Russian counterparts that they're facing, and also the Russian equipment that they've had in their own inventory for quite some time. So I don't believe that's actually the case as far as what we're actually seeing on video. But, once again, there's always a flip side, and there's never really a clear answer to that kind of stuff. Either the Ukrainians have godlike accuracy, which we've seen largely through the wars to be true, but to this degree, it seems nearly inhuman. So they either have godlike accuracy, or those computer systems did make it to Ukraine, and they're using them to target the Russians, which is why a lot of their artillery hits with, say, the M777 are hitting almost dead on their mark, almost 12 miles or 15 miles out within the first or second shot. So with that, I hope that does answer that question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And I just want to mention, all of our channel regulars already know this because I hear it from us a million times over. But if you are new, the way we do it is we always answer our super chats first, and then we get to all of our live chat questions. I compile all of them, and then at the end of the stream, we answer a whole boatload of them. So if you want to have your question answered on stream, please tag either me or the Enforcer, and I will be sure to add it to our list, and we will try to answer it before the stream ends. And once again, thank you to everyone for all of their support. And our last super chat of the segment goes to Jose Diaz, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Greetings from Puerto Rico. Russian TV continues to stay stupid and clueless and dumbness crap. If they attack NATO, they will feel the might of the U.S. and NATO. Gloria a Ukrainia and Semper Fi."
Now, thank you so much for the support, and I do have to agree, I was really heavily debating, just for y'all to know, those who love to watch the Russian news segments, I was really debating adding the one I saw today because I felt like it was kind of weighing in on a bit of a political thing, but there was an American politician that was shown on Russian TV today. I will not say their name, but they are a politician here in the United States that is supporting the idea that Ukraine ought to step forward to the negotiating table and pretty much give the Russians whatever they want and see to their demands to end the war because the United States isn't going to support them. And I can kind of see where everyone comes from. There's really no correct answer in politics. There's always a point out there somewhere. But the thing is that in this perspective, not only is this going to be throwing 40 million people under the bus, which is the entirety of Ukraine, this is going to be throwing Western interests under the bus as well. The Ukrainians are heavily rooted into Western interests right now in Eastern Europe, and they could be a brand new potential ally for NATO, so that way we can, of course, expand our influence and, of course, ensure that the Russians aren't able to resurge and try and become a superpower of their own again. I don't really think the Russians would be able to do that even if we didn't support Ukraine, but still, the point does stand. I was going to include that, but due to reasons of it seeming to be political, I didn't. So with that, thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question. And yes, the Russian television always says stupid stuff, and I have to agree with you. And so with that, I thank you so much for being a proud Lee Spring member from Puerto Rico. That's really cool. I think you're one of our few viewers from Puerto Rico. But with that, thank you once again for the support, and that is the end of this question segment. We're now going to cover the entirety of the news that's left from the night. This will include the northern Donbass, where a large amount of news is unfolded near the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk area. We'll also be covering the Luhansk news, the Donetsk news, and then we'll be covering the small amount of Southern Front news right over here that we have, and also a little bit of news from Snake Island. After we cover all of that, we'll once again be returning to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelensky, and then we'll be going into the question segments. So without further ado, let's go to Izium. Starting off in Izium, today we did see that the Russians still have T-90Ms in action, apparently a very small number, because we did see video footage today of a Russian T-90M in action somewhere around Izium. And so, here's the video of that T-90M in operation. see it firing into the distance. We don't know what it's shooting at. You know, the T90M, when I show this in a second after this video is over, looks like a pretty strong and powerful tank, but we've already seen one of them get destroyed in Ukraine, and on top of that, they're just highly upgraded tanks from the 70s. So the questionability of this thing and how competent it really is on the table for me. Right here, I think we can see this T90M going into reverse. And once again, they have not, although this is supposed to be an upgraded T90, it appears that they still have not upgraded the transmission, as it looks to have only one reverse gear. And so it can only go about 4 miles per hour in reverse, which is abysmal. Now, a lot of people, just to let y'all know, make a lot of jokes about the Leclair main battle tank, because the Leclair has as many reverse gears as it has forward gears. And while that does seem a little bit silly, when you really think about it, that's ideal, because not only can the tank go full speed forwards, it can go full speed backwards, and so it can keep its frontal armor, the strongest part of the tank, facing towards the enemy, while it's able to back up at full speed like it was driving in the other direction. So a smart move by the French, but we can see that the Russians are no believer in that kind of strategy or doctrine, as they put only one reverse gear in their tank, and that's literally just for the sole purpose so that way it can back up, but it's not really giving these Russians any kind of advantage here. Now, just to remind everyone what the T90M looks like, it does look pretty mean, I will admit that. But we'll go to the pictures here and I'll show y'all the T90M. So this is a T90M. This is compared, I guess you could say, to the T72B3. Hopefully I can find a picture for that. T72B3, which is the most upgraded version next to the T90M. They're both based off of the T72 chassis, and this is what I would consider on par, or really, I guess a better comparison would actually be the T90A. So this is what's under that fancy-looking modern armor, is this tank, which is literally no different than the T72, it just has some slight upgrades. So the only difference we can visually see on picture is that it appears to have slightly better armor on the upper plate, and also some heavily improved turret armor. It may have an entirely new turret, we don't really know that for certain though. But that's really the only two differences amongst them, and we've also seen T90Ms already get knocked out in the Kharkiv area, and so it's like, is this really a more effective tank? Apparently not, it just has a little bit extra armor on it. So with that, that is the end of that video, and we're now going to move out of the Izium area, and we're going to move past the Lyman area as well, where we've got no news, and we're now finally going to move into the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk area, where we've gotten some rather unfortunate news. It appears that the Russians, if you may remember, the map actually had a large indentation here, where the Ukrainians were still in control of Kherson. It appears that the Russians were able to push some kind of a large breakthrough, broke the Ukrainian lines, and have pushed so far that they've actually captured the town of Vovchyurivka, which is right behind Lysychansk to the south. This threatens the Ukrainian defensive positions, which are well defended along the river banks here at the Seversky Donetsk River in the city, because the Russians could encircle them, cut them off from the only highway out of the city, and then they would be besieged. So right now, it does appear that the Ukrainians here are in a very bad situation, and it does seem that they are already retreating out of the city of Lysychansk as well, now that their positions have been compromised. It's a little bit of unfortunate news, but then again, they did not give this entire area up without a fight. It took the Russians a month and a week to be able to take this city, and pretty much Lysychansk as well. And just to put that into context, it took the Americans and the British, really though in coalition, a month and a half to conquer the entirety of Iraq in 2003. So that kind of puts it into perspective how long it really took for them to take this city. And when you put that kind of gain into perspective against an entire country the size of Iraq, the success seems small. But still, it's an unfortunate loss for the Ukrainians, and hopefully they can regroup their defensive lines somewhere else, as now their holdings on the Seversky Donetsk River are kind of pointless because the Russians have now caused a breakthrough where there is no such barrier. But moving on to our video evidence, we did see on day 125 some old footage of the Ukrainians in Severodonetsk. This is apparently from days ago, and so here's the video. They're driving a car down a road, littered with destroyed cars and debris all over. It appears that they're about to cross a bridge. They're now crossing the bridge, and you can see more destroyed equipment. We can now see Ukrainian soldiers walking through a building. Now running through the open.
Window 4.
This is some older footage. We have seen this on the channel before.
Yeah. Ready? 1, 2, go!
We can now see some of that old footage once again where they're running across the open area with the anti-tank weapon. You can see an abandoned BMP-2 to the right over there in the shrubs. They're now going to stand alongside it.
Let's go.
Now they're running back to the building after firing their anti-tank weapons. Now we can see some new footage where they're apparently at some kind of a bus terminal. And the video then ends there. It's very sad to know that the Ukrainians did lose this city. They fought tooth and nail for it, though, and the Russians didn't take it without a fight. There's practically nothing left of both Rubizhny and Severodonetsk due to the length of fighting there. The Russians were practically able to destroy every single building and decimate them to rubble throughout the entirety of the city. Moving on from that to some Day 124 news, we saw that the 24th Brigade in Lysychansk was able to hit a Russian tank with an ATGM across the river. Here's the footage. Now the tank is right here, just in case you can't see it all too well. It's where my mouse cursor is circling. They've now fired the Stugna. The Stugna is traveling. And it's about to hit it straight onto the front plate and roast it like some Rice Krispies. And there we have it. Great to see that they did knock out another Russian tank, and once again, they didn't take Severodonetsk and Lysychansk without losses, like we saw there. Now moving on to some more Day 125 news, we've seen the headquarters unit of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade hit while moving outside the city. This was actually the headquarters unit, which is called the command staff in the title, of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, which is near Lysychansk, and they were hit by a Russian airstrike. Now, the only reason I'm showing this footage, while it is Russian, I usually discredit Russian kills, is because footage like this, showing a convoy on the ground that has no clear Russian markings, does indicate that this was a Ukrainian command unit, most likely, that was hit. And if so, that means that the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade may be in a very precarious situation in terms of its chain of command right now, and they're probably trying to figure out a way to, of course, have field promotions and get new commanders in charge during this very perilous time for their unit. It's always unfortunate to see Ukrainian losses, but such is war. Not everyone will survive, not even the good guys. And so, it's a bit of an unfortunate video, but it's one that's necessary to watch, and it does portray the situation that's going on in Lysychansk. We see the convoy continuously being hit. Now one of the vehicles is caught on fire, and we can see that pretty much all the vehicles in this convoy have been damaged to the point that they've been abandoned, or just destroyed outright by the artillery. So an unfortunate video to see for sure. And hopefully none of these Ukrainian soldiers died in vain, as their defense of that city for a whole month and a week showed that Ukraine still has a fighting spirit, and hopefully the Western arms that have been sent, the M142s, the M270s, the Panzerhaubitze 2000s, and all of the other heavy artillery which will be sent within the coming weeks, will be able to help the Ukrainians hold the line and eventually turn the tide. With that, we're now going to be moving down to the southern side of Lysychansk, where we can see on day 26, special forces, both the Russian VDV and the Ukrainian SSO, clashed in the southern side of the city, and we can see this footage from the Russian perspective. Here's the video. It's unfortunate to know that the Ukrainians will be losing this city. We've pretty much already heard that that's the case. And we can see here Ukrainian troops repositioning in Lysychansk. The caption said that they were retreating, but there's really no way to retreat on foot. There wouldn't be enough ground covered, so I'm assuming that they were most likely repositioning. Here the Ukrainians are running down a road in a large group.
Ланос, пропустить Ланос! Троих, быстро, три, прыгнули. Трое.
We
Быстрее,
hear
блядь.
artillery landing in the distance. I'm not really sure
Давай,
what
бегом,
the
блядь.
soldier was doing in that car, but apparently he did have some kind of an emergency and was trying to get out there as fast as he could.
Еще одна машина. Еще одна машина. В Андрюха, ну прыгаем, быстро, блядь. Быстро. 5 человек, блядь. 5 человек.
We can now see a lot of passing
Быстро,
through. We
блядь.
can see soldiers hopping into it.
Хорош, красавцы, блядь. Уходим, блядь. Быстрее. Быстрее, Горыныч. Понизу йдемо. На низ перейдіть, блядь. Сука, блядь. Ебануться нахуй.
It's very unfortunate, of course, and I've said this almost after every single clip, but it's very unfortunate to see that the Ukrainians are losing this area. But once again, it wasn't without the Ukrainians putting up one of the largest fights of the war. Severodonetsk was Ukraine's version of Stalingrad, practically. It even beat out Mariupol in terms of its destructive, I guess you could say, abilities and ends that both sides took trying to hold that city. But sadly, it looks like it's all coming to a close right now, as we did see on day 124 a fast escape from an ambush by Ukrainians south of the city, as the Russians pretty much blew through the Ukrainian lines down there and were now nearly encircling the city. And we can see that these Ukrainian soldiers here just narrowly survived an ambush that was made by this breakthrough unit.
Она стояла там. Оранжевая.
Она стояла там, пацаны. Смотрите движение людей.
Оранжевая стояла.
Где беттеры? Тут?
Вот, Байтер, он дальше. Один компаньер, другой вот за остановкой. Возле остановки.
Опа! Стрелять! Стреляй на!
We now hear them firing down the street as they almost ran headlong into this Russian ambush.
Быстро, Саша, развертайся, бля, сейчас покрошу нахуй. Сука. Та Саш, поїхали, хуй з ним, блядь, на пустих, блядь. В'юби.
Не. Стрелять!
They're now trying to turn around on the road, it appears.
Куда же, блядь, сука.
We can hear return fire being directed at the car.
Работает, а? Нет, нет.
We can now see them barreling their way out of the area, luckily managing to escape from that ambush and live to fight another day. They're still firing off the machine gun on the top of the armored car. And the video ends right there. Luckily, these soldiers were able to escape that ambush, and it does show how fast the Russians were able to break through the lines there and cover such an amount of ground. And I think that maybe, if we measure from Kherson to that part of the front, that is the largest Russian breakthrough in terms of ground covered during the course of this war after about the first month. Usually, the Russians can only cover around 2 miles a day. But here, just on day 124, they were able to cover nearly 10 miles in a single day, showing that that was a large Russian breakthrough that did occur in that area of the front. Rather unfortunate, and that does, on another note, cut off practically the T-1302 from ever being reopened again. The shared front line on both sides of the T-1302 now by both the Ukrainians and the Russians spans some 8.5 miles. So it's such a large front on that highway, it's going to be nearly unlikely that the Ukrainians will be able to push them far enough back off of 8.5 miles of this highway to be able to reopen it for logistical use. And also, considering that Lysychansk's position has been threatened directly and the troops will be withdrawing, we're most likely going to see the Ukrainians set up new defensive positions, but I'm not going to give away what they're most likely going to do, just in case if I am right. With that, we're now going to be moving into Luhansk, where today we did see some good news to kind of counter the bad news that we've gotten in Luhansk. Today we saw the Ukrainians hit another large ammo depot within Luhansk, and the explosion and the subsequent cloud from the explosion was massive. Here's the video. We see a little bit of smoldering, a little bit of smoking. We can see another fireball erupt out of the ammunition depot. Some good stuff, really. Great to see that the Ukrainians are still wiping out ammunition stores behind the front, and with that, we're now going to be moving back to the Luhansk area to once again cover a little bit more of this, because I think I was kind of painting it in a bad light, but once I started thinking about it, I once again have to give this note a little bit of a disclaimer. Ukraine is fighting a defensive war. The entire purpose of a defensive war is to wear down the enemy enough that you can eventually push them back. And so far, the Ukrainians have been wearing the Russians down, but the Russians are still making a little bit of ground here in the only area of the front line they're actually continuing any kind of offensive activities. Eventually, much like the rest of the front lines, the Ukrainians will run the Russians down of energy, supplies, and morale enough that they'll be able to probably push them back, much like we've seen in the Kherson area, where they're still pushing them back to this day, but it's the amount of progress the Ukrainians are making is a little bit smaller. So once again, I do have to point out that while this is not necessarily good for the Ukrainians, they will hopefully rebound from this, and it is a defensive war after all, and if you are in a defensive war against a supposedly stronger country, you do get a little bit of leeway to lose cities and land here and there. That's what a defensive war is. You do have to remember that the French were managing to lose ground all the way through to 1918 in World War I, yet they still came out on top at the end. Just for y'all to remember, I believe it was the Second Battle of the Marne, which occurred in early 1918. The Germans broke through the French lines again and started racing towards Paris, and it was the United States Marine Corps that met them during the Second Battle of the Marne and managed to stop them dead in their tracks. So just to keep that in mind, you can manage to lose ground in a defensive war like the Ukrainians are right now and still win in the end. Just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. Moving on out of the Luhansk area and into Donetsk, we saw near Svitlodarsk today, the 30th Brigade once again was shelling Russians and taking more of them out. Here's the video. And we'll have to mute it. Artillery hit dead onto that building. Once again, another testament to Ukrainian accuracy and maybe the accuracy of Western weapons. We don't know what artillery was hitting this building. See another artillery shell hit the building. We can now see Russian soldiers piling out of the building like a clown car, and now they're running to the next one. It looks like they're running right into the buildings that just got hit. Very smart group of people. We now see they hit it again. So it looks like the Russians kind of had a little bit of a gamut of bad luck there, running into the same place that got hit. And unlike lightning, which doesn't strike twice in the same place, artillery can hit twice in the same place very easily. So it looks like they just walked right into that one. We can now see the Russians carting out a wounded man, which tells you how well that little move didn't do them well at all. Just watching the footage here. I've kind of lost sight of the Russians, actually. I looked away for a second to look at the live chat. Now I can't find the Russians. That's good. You know, I wonder if anyone on the front lines has anything like that, where they're looking at the Russians through binoculars, and they look over to someone to talk to him real quick. They look back and they're gone. And they're like, oh god, they're gone. But we can see the Ukrainian artillery hitting them on the tree line. Apparently they know where they are. But we can't see how many losses were caused by that strike. But once again, that's the end of the video. And you can kind of see some of the YouTube videos that are recommended to me throughout the day. And I have to say, just as a quick aside, if y'all have never watched a summary or the movie Threads itself, it's a very good movie on what a nuclear war would entail. It's very realistic and very grim at that, which is realistic on its own right. But with that, we're now going to be moving further down the front into some day 124 news. And this brought a smile to my face. It really did. And I hope it brings a smile to y'all's as well. The Sparta Battalion is a group of Donetsk soldiers. It's some of like the most communist soldiers from the DPR, and they've been there ever since 2014, and they're still fighting in this war. We can see a soldier from the Sparta Battalion using some kind of an ATGM, and he fires it, and he almost dies. I'm going to let y'all see how he almost dies in the video, and I'm not going to spoil it for y'all. He's preparing the ATGM to fire. He's now firing it. And then, oh, I just wish he didn't have a helmet on. The giant hunk of debris got dislodged from the ceiling and fell down right onto his head, and his helmet saved him. Just watch that again. It was so close. Oh. If he wasn't wearing a helmet, that would have been lights out for him. It sounds a little bit morbid, but I wish the rock had fallen right on his head and he didn't have a helmet on, because that would have helped the Ukrainians not have to take out one extra soldier from the DPR. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk area. We haven't gotten any other news from this area rather than this one video, but it was an entertaining video at that, and it was just so close. I mean, like, golly, that was a real clincher right there. But anyways, no more news from the Donetsk area. As far as we know, the Ukrainians are still in the Kyievsky district and have never been pushed out, and so they did manage to make a little bit of ground, but beyond that, we haven't really seen much more developments in this area. Moving on throughout the entirety of the rest of the front line, which has no activity to report, all the way from Marinka to Kremenchuk, which is on the other side of the southern front line, nothing has happened here. Moving beyond that area and all the way to Kherson, it doesn't seem like a lot of activity is still occurring in the Kherson area, although officially the Ukrainian counterattack is still ongoing. And we did get a little bit of evidence today as the 59th Brigade is still pushing the offensive here on video with their artillery. And so here's the video. We can see they're using a Mista B SPG. Artillery is now slamming into the Russian units, and a little bit of smoke's being caused. I don't think Smokey the Bear likes the Russians, as I believe they've caused more wildfires this year than the eucalyptus trees in California. That's definitely going to cause a little bit of a wildfire. Good to see that they are still pushing the offensive a little bit, specifically with artillery, but beyond that, we haven't gotten a lot of video evidence today to show the progress of the Ukrainian counterattacks in this area. Last we heard, down near Kherson, the Ukrainians were around 5 miles to 7 miles away from Kherson. It was actually within sight. You could actually see the city, but they hadn't got there yet. And what's crazy to me is that if I ever went to my city and measured out 5 miles, I can actually see the next 5 miles from my house, which is really bizarre to me to think that they are that close to Kherson. It's really within reach for them. With that, We're now going to be moving out of the Kherson area as there's no more news to report from there. And we're now going to be taking a trip back in time to day 124, where we can see more attacks being conducted on Snake Island from Bayraktars. And we can see that they actually did manage to cause a little bit more damage as they took out a Russian pantsir today. Here's the video, and I'm going to rewind it so that way you can see it from the start. There's the explosion there. I don't even know why the Russians are on Snake Island anymore, because everything they send there winds up dying. Looks like that's the burning pantsir right there. And another loss for the Russians again on Snake Island, which has practically become a cursed symbol for them. I'm sure that the Russians that get put there are kind of put there because of poor behavior or poor conduct or something, because it almost seems like a disciplinary post at this point where you get sent there to either die or have a really bad time. So with that, it's good to see that the Ukrainians are still attacking Snake Island and actually causing decent damage. And it is good to see that the Ukrainians still have functional Bayraktars and they're using them to attack Snake Island. With that, we have now gone full circle around the world today, from St. Petersburg to Mykolaiv, and from Mykolaiv to Snake Island. We're now going to circle all the way back to Kyiv to cover the speech that we got today from President Zelensky. And here it is. It's a speech from Volodymyr Zelensky.
Українці, українки, всі наші захисники і захисниці. Щойно я взяв участь у спеціальному засіданні Ради безпеки ООН, яке було скликано на прохання України. Скликано Албанією, ця держава головує в Радбезі. Ми задіяли усі міжнародні важелі, щоб притягнути Росію до відповідальності за державний тероризм, за все зроблено російською армією проти українців в Кременчуці, в Очакові, в Lysychanську, в Харкові, в Дніпрі, в багатьох інших містах нашої держави. Станом на цей вечір загальна кількість російських ракет, які ударили по наших містах, вже 2811. А скільки ще авіабомб, скільки артилерійських снарядів. Рада безпеки ООН сьогодні, стоячи, вшанувала пам'ять усіх українців, вбитих російською армією на нашій землі. Члени російської делегації озирнулись на усіх присутніх в залі Радбезу і теж вирішили встати, просто щоб не виглядати вбивцями відверто. Але всі знають, що це саме російський терор, саме російська держава вбиває ні в чому невинних людей на цій війні, розв'язаній проти українського народу. Я закликав ООН скористатись вже наявними механізмами статуту ООН, щоб припинити російські маніпуляції структурами організації і щоб створити спеціальний трибунал для розслідування дій російських окупантів на українській землі. Правоохоронні органи і розвідка України роблять все, щоб встановити усіх російських військових, які відповідальні за терор проти наших міст. Прізвища, обличчя і вся інформація про кожного з цих терористів будуть відомі світу. Ніхто з них не зможе уникнути відповідальності і персональних санкцій для цих осіб буде недостатньо. Вирок суду і тюрма. Ось це мінімум, на який вони заслуговують. І окремо хочу сказати про відповідальність тих російських пропагандистів, які брешуть про цей терор, які намагаються виправдати дії російської армії. Кожен із вас також буде покараний. Ми маємо всі докази того, що роблять російські військові проти наших людей. Сьогодні я хочу завершити це звернення одним з таких доказів, щоб ніхто не смів обманювати щодо ракетного удару по торговельному центру в Кременчуці. Російська ракета ударила саме по цьому об'єкту. Ціле спрямовано. Очевидно, що такий був наказ. Очевидно, що такі координати отримали російські вбивці для цієї ракети. Вони хотіли убити якнайбільше людей в мирному місті, в звичайному торговельному центрі. Ось як це було в Кременчуці. І за цей акт державного тероризму, як і за всі інші, Росія буде відповідати на полі бою в Україні посиленням санкцій і обов'язково в трибуналі. Я вдячний всім, хто захищає Україну, підписав сьогодні новий указ про нагородження наших героїв. Ще 314 учасників бойових дій відзначені державними нагородами. Вічна слава нашим захисникам і захисницям. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of President Zelensky's speech for here on day 125. And I do like to change the background with that lit up trident back there. That was a very nice addition. And he did touch on some very important topics today, which of course included the Kremenchuk attack, which was one of the worst attacks on civilians during the course of this war. With that, that is the end of the news, and of course we'll be doing like we did last time, just for some people who want to stay around. I'll be answering map quizzes and history quizzes during our question segment, but that is the conclusion of the news tonight. Thank you all so much for watching once again. It was really cool to have you all around and listening to the news once more. And with that, we're now going to move on to our question segment and answer everyone's super chat, and we're also going to be answering several live chat questions as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and it is now time for the question segment. So as I mentioned earlier, we're first going to answer our super chats and then get to our live chat questions. So if you put in a question, stick around and it'll probably get answered very soon. But before we get to that, I want to go over the poll that is put up about 15 minutes ago. And the question was, as of today, what is your current opinion of Ukraine's situation? It looks like only 28% of you said that they are winning, 45% said a stalemate, and then 27% said they are losing. So that is the opinion of the chat. And Enforcer, do you have any take on that?
I do. I actually think that that's about the same at this point. From what we've seen on the front lines, there hasn't been a lot of movement by either side, and I would be amiss to, every time I say the Russians aren't making any kind of offensives anywhere on the front lines, except for one. The Ukrainians are also doing the same. So it's really a stalemate at this point, because the Russians are on the defensive in one area of the front line, which is Kherson. The Ukrainians are on the defensive in one part of the front line, which is Severodonetsk. The Russians are on the offensive in Severodonetsk, and the Ukrainians are on the offensive in Kherson. So it kind of is the same thing by and large on both sides of the front line, and I do believe that it is kind of devolved into a stalemate at the moment. But hopefully with more Western weapons, the Ukrainians will be able to break this stalemate and start to push the Russians back out. So I hope that does address it, and with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and the first super chat is from John Boyer, who puts in a $33 donation, and thank you very much for the support, John. And his question is, thanking Putin's ego, let's see here, he meant to say, thanking Putin's insane ego and denial will lead to his ultimate downfall, question mark. History be not kind to foe Tsar Putin. Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, excellent delivery and energy tonight. Slava President Zelensky and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I do have to agree that the Russians most likely will not last too much longer, considering that they're not even able to repay their debts. And I have seen a lot of people saying that they're not allowed to pay or something like that. But how it was explained to me and how I was reading it, it did appear, and we'll actually pull that up. We'll pull that up and try and get a more better description on that. Russia default on debt. Let's see what that says. Let's see. Let's try and we'll go with Bloomberg. I don't like going with major news outlets, but we'll read this here. Russia defaulted. For months, Russia had found paths around the penalties imposed after the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. But at the end of the day, on Sunday, the grace period of around 100 million of trapped interest payments due May 27th expired, a deadline considered an event of default if missed. The route of this point has been far from normal, as Russia has the resources to pay its bills and has tried to do so, but was blocked by the sanctions. Okay, so y'all were correct. Those restrictions also mean there's huge uncertainty about what comes next and about how investors can go about getting their money. With Russia benefiting from the high price of its energy exports, it clearly has both the means and the desire to pay its foreign debts. Says Giles Coughlin, chief analyst, geez, I got that wrong, at the HYCM group. It's a default in the technical sense, so many investors may be prepared to wait it out. Okay, so it's not as bad as I was assuming it was, based off of what I had heard. It pretty much meant that the Russian economy would collapse, but doesn't appear to be the case. So I hate to say that, but hopefully the Russian economic collapse will be coming around soon, and hopefully due to these heavy sanctions which have led to that, they can hopefully lead to even more things. But with that, I hope that does address the question in a way, and also address something else that was kind of left unsolved since the beginning of the stream on my end, and I will have to go back and correct that. Apparently it doesn't mean that Russia's gone broke, it just means that the sanctions aren't allowing them to pay off those debts. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, I just saw somebody say to please turn down the plop, so I can't hear it on my end, but they must be hearing it on theirs.
Oh yeah, I'll make sure to do that. We'll go here, and then we will mute that little sound thing. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And now that that plopping is turned down, up next, I want to recognize a $25 super chat from Brant Sturgill. Thank you very much for your donation to the channel and your support. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from David Bacco, who says, I love what you do, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. You are awesome. Slava Ukraine, and I love you guys. And thank you very much, David. I know you've been watching for quite some time. We appreciate you being here once again, and I'm going to turn it over to the Enforcer.
And I've got to say, thank you so much for the wonderful words. It's always wonderful to get a lot of support from our viewers because it does make what we do seem worthwhile. And also, I was wanting to run this by y'all. This is something that I'm kind of already starting to move in the direction of, but I would like to run it by y'all in a poll. We are thinking about trying to move this channel on to different kinds of news. Well, we're not going to, just before I say this, so that way it doesn't come out wrong, we're not going to be ending the Ukraine war streams. The Ukraine war streams, like I have said, are going to continue on till about the end of time, as however long this war goes on. But the other thing is the short summaries that are put up during the day. We're actually thinking, because I have a limited amount of time and it's one or the other, I can either continue to make the summaries, or I can close the summaries down. I'll give them about like a 10-day or a week grace period where those videos will still be uploaded. But by the end of that, we're going to be maybe moving towards uploading a weekly video that's focusing on a different topic rather than Ukraine, and we're looking at trying to make it as best as possible. A lot of y'all may have known about the Browns Ferry video, and we're still thinking about doing that one. But now we're trying to look at just having a wide array of different kinds of videos to cover, like World War II history, modern-day politics and economics. Of course, not politics as in who's right and who's wrong, just explaining situations around the world. Diplomacy, maybe moving into China and Taiwan. There's a whole bunch of stuff that could open up for us if we were able to move on to videos. But we have been I've been thinking about that for a while, and I was just wondering what y'all would think about that. So, with that, I thank you so much for the support once again, and I hope that does lead us into having an interesting poll here. And so with that, if you could throw up that poll, Matthew, and just make it a yes or no question, would they like to move on from the summaries into different kinds of news? And after you do that, we'll move on to the next question.
All right, and just a moment while I throw up that poll, the question was, would you like what again?
Would you like to have the summaries replaced with videos on different kinds of news?
Videos of different types of news. All right, and that poll should be popping up here any second now. Hopefully it is correct there, and it looks like there it is. All right, so with that being said, we are on to our next super chat, which is from Dan Stauffer, who puts in a $20 donation and says, why do we not send our AC-130s?
We do not send the AC-130s, one, because they're not really effective. Now, that's one thing that a lot of people have. You know, a lot of people have built-up images of aircraft in their minds, but they really don't come out that way in real life. Like the A-10 Warthog. A lot of people think of that as an armored flying tank, but in the Gulf War, the A-10s being shot down made up around 50% of the coalition's air casualties, you know, in terms of aircraft. And so in that regard, it wasn't really an armored tank. But still, it's an impressive plane. And there's also a lot of other problems with the A-10 coming all the way down to its gun. The gun, actually, when it was tested for the first time in the 70s, before the A-10 was even a plane, they actually found out that the gun didn't even have enough penetrating power to puncture through the older tanks like the M47. And let me pull that one up, just to give you all an idea of what an M47 looks like. Fun fact, Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he served in the Austrian army, actually drove one of these tanks. He was a tank driver, but that's what an M47 is, and the A-10 wasn't even able to puncture the armor on this pretty old and aging tank, so the gun had to be used against soft targets. There's a lot of problems with the A-10, but moving back to the AC-130, the AC-130 is a death trap, specifically in modern war. If the enemy has any kind of competent air defenses, it can't fly whatsoever. And we know that the Russians have a decent amount of S-400s and S-300s along with Buks and a whole bunch of other AA systems. The list goes on. Pantsirs, Tunguskas, they have loads of them. And whether that thing flew during the day or at night like it usually does, usually the AC-130 flies at night, that thing is such a large radar signature and it's so slow that the Ukrainians would never be able to use it because it would just get shot down nearly immediately. So sadly, although it is a really cool plane, I do have to admit, it's practically useless in the modern war based off of the air defenses that everyone has. And so even if we could send it over, I would highly recommend not to. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and moving on to the next one, we have a super chat from Rick McGee, who says, what are the red swaths on the map?
The red swaths on the map... The red swaths. Is he talking about the red line or that red dot near Mariupol?
I'm not really sure.
If you're talking about the red line represents our known locations of Russian forces and where the front line probably is. I will give the disclaimer, though, this is not entirely accurate. This front line is completely based off of the collection of video and picture evidence for the most part, and so some areas of the front aren't perfectly representative of what you'll find on other maps, but it's representative of what we've been able to get based off of video and picture evidence. If you're talking about this little red square here, get it? But if you're talking about that little red square here, that's actually an area of partisan activity that's been largely known for some time, but we don't really know a lot about it, so it's just a red field that indicates partisan activity. But with that, I hope that does answer your question, at least in some way. And also, this little area here is supposed to signify a Ukrainian counterattack that we were never able to confirm. And so I hope that covers all three of the red lines. And with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And we are moving on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $50 super chat from Robert Johnson, who says, you already covered the fact Russia can afford to pay its bills. So instead, I'll say, after seeing that father trying to get his little boy to safety after the mall bombing, I wish someone would, you know what, you know who.
I really wish that as well, and it's sickening to see that stuff just keeps on going on no matter what's going on around the world. It just, the suffering and everything just continues on with the Russians committing those attacks on the Ukrainians. Just day in and day out, missile attacks on every single city, usually hitting civilian targets and killing several people, if not dozens of people. And you know, that was something that really crossed my mind a lot and affected me a lot during the Kremenchuk attack, because I didn't show a lot of stuff on stream that I saw from that attack, but that one was far more graphic than the attack we've seen on Kremenchuk so far. In the Kramatorsk attack, I saw a kid who had been laid on a bench at the train station, and a piece of shrapnel had flown straight into his head and cut it in two, and his brain was just taken with it. And so there was just this empty bowl that was the top of his head, and he was just there dead, you know, pale as death. And that picture really struck me, and it's stuck with me ever since. I can still remember what that kid looked like exactly. But it's sickening to me to think that the Russians just keep on doing this stuff, and they're largely getting away with it. And so hopefully in the future, you know, down the road, someone will be able to hold Russia accountable for what they're doing. But it's going to be very hard to do that, honestly. You know, like, it's a real world out here. And while I would love to say that all of these Russian war criminals will be held accountable for what they've done, I largely think they won't be, because Russia will probably exist at the end of this war. The government will most likely survive. And so there's going to be no way to go in there and grab these people and then try and have them executed for their crimes, or at least put in prison for them. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. I entirely agree with you that I did not like that whatsoever, and especially seeing that it's happened twice. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you very much for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman, and he says, you're awesome, on a super sticker.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. Of course, it does help us out a lot, and we're always appreciative of everyone and how much they're able to help out this channel to keep on running, and also for your support as well, because it does mean a lot to me that a lot of people do enjoy this channel. And so with that, thank you once again from the bottom of my heart. It's very nice to hear that people do really enjoy this channel. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from William Allen, who says, the A-10's success depends on the support package built for its mission. For example, AWACS, Wild Weasel ECM, and a host of other neat toys. They don't go in alone.
That's very true, and that's one thing though that the Ukrainians would never get is AWACS and such things like that, because those particular planes are incredibly expensive, in the U.S., even being the superpower it is, only has a certain number of those, and we don't want to give them away because, of course, they're strategically important for national security here in the U.S. So if the AC-130 was ever sent over, it most likely wouldn't be sent with AWACS and such things, and that's if we can even get past the point of sending aircraft to Ukraine at all. But I do know what you're saying. That is true. And I thank you very much for the support. But one question I have is, does AWACS interfere with manpads? Because I'm not sure if they do or don't. But with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from BSG Wolf, who says, in your opinion, how safe is it for civilians to travel to Kiev to the USA Embassy?
That, from Kyiv to the U.S. Embassy?
Correct.
Well, if you're talking about the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, it wouldn't be that dangerous. You know, it'd just be pretty much a train ride or a bus ride down the road. But if you're talking about making it from Kyiv to the U.S., well, I mean, like, I guess there is no U.S. Embassy in the United States, so I guess you're talking about Kyiv. So in that instance, I would say that it wouldn't be too difficult, really. It would just be pretty much a drive, or, you know, just riding somewhere to get to it. So I hope that does answer the question. But of course, I'm not entirely sure. As far as I know, the Russians are making sure not to hit embassies and consulates in Ukraine, because if they do, that is technically an attack on U.S. sovereign soil. An embassy, just for those of y'all who do not know, an embassy from the United States, wherever it may be, the ground it encompasses is technically considered U.S. sovereign soil, and so an attack upon it is kind of like an attack on the U.S. So I don't think they would be directly attacking the U.S. embassy in Ukraine, and so with that, I hope that kind of does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have an $18 super chat from Junebug72, who says, that shopping center with around 1,000 people were mostly women and children. I feel that NATO involvement is not just needed, but defensively inevitable. Putin only responds to violence, it appears.
That's pretty true. I would have to agree with that as well. And one thing that's really annoying to me about the entire thing is that the Russians are practically relying on the United States or no countries directly stepping up for Ukraine and saying they'll get directly involved. Because at this point, it seems like they've kind of resigned the idea of Ukraine getting support from the West. But if a country actually stepped up and said, if this war continues on, we'll be going to war as well, I would like to see what the Russians would do. I think by and large, that would force them into a peace agreement, and then they would back down. But then again, no country is really brave enough to try and step up and do such a thing at the moment. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in my opinion, and take it with a grain of salt because it is only my opinion. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you very much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $30 super chat from Zyper Sniper 1, who says, coffee fund for the Enforcer and Matt. Congrats on 80,000 subscribers, Enforcer.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I do thank you so much for congratulating us for 80,000 subscribers, because I do have good news, and let me pull up my YouTube studio here and get it refreshed. We have gotten 80,094 subscribers, blowing past 80,000 and nearly getting another 100 subscribers tonight. So, great job, everyone. We have now surpassed 80, and we're now on that final mile, that last long mile to 100,000 subscribers. I feel like what the videos will most likely be coming out with here in the future, although it does look like the poll is saying no at the moment. We will be probably looking at trying to expand our news and allow more people to get the kind of news that we deliver. Hopefully it would be heavily expected. But with that, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, I have to say, 80,000 subs, that definitely deserves a yeah!
You just cut out.
Really?
Yeah, you just
maybe went through on the live stream, possibly. But yeah, whenever we yell really loud, sometimes our mics cut out. So I don't know if anybody heard that, but I did a very extremely loud yeehaw. I probably woke up everybody in the house. So before we get any flack from that, I'm going to move on to the next super chat. Next up, we have an $11 donation from Dieter Herfert, who does not leave a comment. So thank you very much for your support to the channel. And I think you might be a new supporter, so thank you very much for supporting the channel. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Mike D, who says, Sunday was such a great day with that anonymous donation. I think I can speak for everyone when I say I what an honor it was to be a part of that evening. Glory to all of us here, and glory to Ukraine.
I would agree as well, but should we tell him, Matthew?
Uh, I mean, I might as well. Might as well be up front.
All right, so we're going to be honest with y'all. We actually got a message from the anonymous donor that night who sent in that amount, and they said that they had put that in by accident. So it was while everyone on the stream was freaking out, and it was an absolute honor for me to be here when that came through. The person who had put that through at that point was having heart palpitations because that was not what they were actually supposed to send. So sadly, I hate to negate that one, but the largest fundraiser amount that's ever been put in on a fundraiser on this show was actually refunded, as far as I know, and I hope it was. Of course, that's out of our control. That's now in YouTube's hands, but hopefully they were able to refund that, because I'd hate to have known that guy put that in and now he's just stuck, holding the cart, if you'd like to say that. But with that, I hope that does kind of answer that question. And I thank you very much for the support once again, but kind of a little bit of a sad end to that story. But with that, we're on to the next one.
Yes, and it looks like from the live chat, many of you are saying that y'all caught the yee, but not the haw. So let's try that one more time. Yeehaw! Maybe it came through that time. I was really struggling to try to muffle that time, so it probably came through. So there's your yeehaw for the night, and we are at 80,000 subs. Thank you very much for that as well. I'm not sure if the enforcer went over it a moment ago. He probably did, but
I did.
For me personally, thank you very much for subscribing to the channel. We appreciate it. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Devin Betterton, who does not leave a comment. We also have a $10 super chat from Gary Robbins, who also does not leave a comment. And thank you very much to both of you for your longtime viewership and your support. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Khan Azor, who says, if anything would solidify the Russian orcs as terrorists, it would be bombing of the mall. They will pay. Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you very much for the support, and also Slava Ukraini. And to answer that question, I do think that does solidify them as terrorists, but honestly, I think that's just a continuation of what they did in Kramatorsk, because at that point, I stopped viewing the Russians as a maybe, a group of maybe sympathetic people where I can understand that maybe some of them are there just because they've been forced to be. And after I saw that attack, they went from those kind of people to people that I was hoping would be harmed by the Ukrainians as fast as possible. So I've kind of already gotten to that point months ago, but I do agree that if that was not the deciding factor for everyone, this Kremenchuk attack on the mall filled with 1,000 people is certainly the deciding factor as to whether the Russians are pretty much a terrorist country or not. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we're going to move on to the next one. But I thank you very much for the support once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from JK, who says, thanks for one of the best, if not best, coverage of the war in Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you very much for the support. I'm glad that you do enjoy our coverage a lot. It's good to know that everyone thinks that this is really good coverage. I try my best to make sure it's as good as possible. And I will admit, because while I do like to toot my own whistle here and there, I will admit some things are wrong. Like tonight, I did say some mistruths about the Russians defaulting on their debt. And we did correct that near the end of the stream, and that's one thing I'm really happy about, is that I'm not one of those people out there who just stick to their guns once they say something wrong. I'm able to assess what I've done or said that was wrong and be like, oh, that was wrong, we'll correct that and then move on. So I thank you very much for the support, and I am glad that you do enjoy the quality of news we deliver. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And for those of y'all who are watching me do the map quiz, it's just asked me to click on Alabama. Also, y'all may know that this map is a little bit different than the normal map of the United States, and that's because this one's from 1861. But with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and let me get rid of that bot real quick that just jumped in the chat. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, once more, and does not leave a comment. So thank you very much for your continued support, William. You've been here forever, and thank you very much for continuing to stick with us through thick and thin, through bot attacks and DDoS attacks. And up next, we have a $21 super chat from Arlie John, who says, strange question. It seems that where I live in San Diego, they pave the streets in multiple potholes. Is the rest of the country roads paved the same?
Wait, where are they from again?
A good old San Diego.
San Diego. Oh, San Diego. I've never been there, but that's about the closest a big city gets here in the United States to Mexico. In fact, I kind of consider Tijuana and San Diego pretty much the same, because beyond the border that separates them, they're kind of the same municipal area if you look at them on the map, which is kind of crazy. But anyways, moving on from that, to talk about the roads in the United States is something that I will get a little political about. I don't know how the United States has a budget that it does for transportation, a discretionary budget. And we'll get to that. Let's go to it. U.S. fiscal budget 2022. All right, and let's go and look at the breakdown of it on a pie chart and show you what's spent on what. So this one's a little bit hard to read, but let me try and find the one that's for infrastructure. Oh, come on, this can't be. This is 6.83 billion. That's hell, that's for California. That's Governor Scott. What in the world? Anyways, let's go to the fiscal budget for 22 for the federal government. Housing, community, where's the infrastructure? Transportation. We spend $43 billion. Let me make sure that's the correct one. Apparently that includes like Amtrak and everything as well. Interesting. Wait a minute, hell, that's nothing really when you look at it. Well, anyways, we spend $43 billion in the United States on transportation. That's around the size of most countries' military budgets, and we consider some countries that spend that much money on their military to be world powers. And we spend that much money on transportation per year, and we actually had something like $1 trillion infrastructure bill passed a while ago, and yet the United States infrastructure is still crumbling. This is something I will get political about because I feel like it's a straight up answer. There's a lot of corruption and I guess you could say the issuance of contracts to, I guess you could say, private companies that do road work. That's usually why simple road work projects end up taking 5 years, is because they're not paid per the amount of time and per job. They're paid, just a lump sum, and they say, okay, get it done by some point, and they just take forever to get it done. And it's honestly crazy to me. And on top of that, every other country in the world is getting high-speed rail, and this is something you can bash both parties on right here, so that way I can kind of be fair. Both parties at this point, the Republicans and the Democrats, have promised and swore to the public that the United States will finally get national high-speed rail. That was guaranteed under the last administration and this one. Yet it's never happened and it's never come to fruition. In fact, every time they give Amtrak money, which is the railroad company that the U.S. government runs, they sit there and publish some kind of a high-speed rail network map and say, oh, it's coming, and then it never comes. And then they spend that money on something else, like billions of dollars for a brand new kind of locomotive or something like that, and it just gets wasted. There's a lot of wasted money in the government, and just to get a little political here, because I feel like everyone gets involved in this, I feel like that wasted spending should be curtailed heavily, because this pie chart right here could stay the exact same way it is if we were just able to spend the money more efficiently and cut out the pretty much pocket lining that's involved in government contracts. But with that, sorry for getting a little bit political there. It's just something that you can almost plainly see, and I think everyone deals with it at this point in the country, like the post office not even mowing the lawn around their buildings. But with that, I hope that it kind of does address the question, because we have the same problem here in Alabama. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from DC Williams, who says, "You all once were good, but the fact is, you've gotten darn good," which is slightly higher on the DC darn good scale.
Well, I got pretty scared there. I thought that was about to be like, you suck, but I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy it. We have tried to make it a little bit better, but of course, that's something that we try to pursue, and it looks like a lot of people have been thinking that the production of the news has been getting better. And I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy our channel. And I'm sorry that I did get a little bit political there. Of course, I didn't weigh in on what party does what, but that's kind of my opinion about infrastructure. So sorry for kind of breaking my own. Well, I actually didn't bash a political party. I just stated what I'm thinking about roads. So it kind of did break my rule, but not really. But I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Louise Salmeron, who says, "Thanks for being my news source for the Russian war against Ukraine and, of course, Slava Ukraine."
And I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that we are a new source of news for you, and I hope you stick around and that you do enjoy our news segments. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but I thank you very much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, "I'd like to see a daily economic sanctions update every day. As consolation, $103 million is going to UNICEF for Ukraine refugees through a Russian Nobel laureate's donation/auction of his recent medal.
And I did hear that, and that was really impressive. You actually sent me that link over Discord, and I did read it. It was pretty good. And thank you very much once again for the support, Hoodoo. Now, one thing I do have to say is that making a daily economic sanctions video is going to overload my schedule pretty good, because right now I'm already pushing it to do college and also the summary video and the streams per day. And so once again, if I was to do something like that, I would have to drop the summaries and then go on to making those videos. But with that, I thank you very much for the support, Hoodoo, and I hope that does answer the question. I'm also looking at this poll over here, and I see that it's a 10% gap in between moving on to different types of news and keeping the daily summaries running. So with that in mind, I think we're going to have to find out some kind of way to keep the summaries running. But one other thing to me is that I've been noticing, much like most Ukrainian videos on YouTube, they're getting less and less views, and that's something that I've been looking at a little bit, is that less and less people, even from our normal subscribers, are watching the daily summaries. Only I think on average now, only 25% of our actual subscribers watch the daily summaries, and that's something else that I'm weighing in, is that not a lot of people are really watching this or getting any gain out of it. Most people are just watching the streams and not the summaries, and that's what's kind of leading me to think maybe we need to move on to other videos on different kinds of news that will be interesting to more people who are on this channel. But with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $9 donation from Simon Gardner, who says the U.S. is in a fantastic position. Their archenemy is fighting with a friend of the U.S., and all of the U.S. has to do is supply weapons to break Russia. Not a drop of U.S. blood. The U.S. can demand Russia get rid of its nukes.
That's true. You could do that. But then again, demanding Russia to get rid of their nukes will be a pretty tough one regardless of the situation. Usually whenever we got the Russians to give up nukes rather than after the Soviet Union's collapse, we had to go through massive political agreements where we would also downscale the size of our nuclear armaments. And also another interesting thing is that nuclear weapons have gotten smaller as time has gone on. No longer is the day where you have just 100 kiloton yield nuclear warheads as the standard warhead in a country. They've now been relegated to usually smaller sizes, and the 100 kiloton and above kind of nuclear weapons are somewhat more rare, and they're in smaller numbers. But something like that would most likely be something that the United States and Russia would both have to agree on. And at the same time, it would also be nice to pull in the other nuclear countries like Pakistan, India, and China, as well as the Israelis, the North Koreans. And that would be really hard to get everyone on the same page and disarming their nuclear weapons at the same time. Because, you know, there's just too many moving cogs in that machine to make it feasible at the moment. But with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you very much for the support. And once again, that's just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. It might be possible. But with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And we're moving on to our next super chat. Yeehaw. Up next, we have a $5 donation from Crazy Boy, who happens to be one of our mods, who says, "Hey, yo, let's do WT after the stream."
Oh yeah, I just remember that. Yes, we will play War Thunder after the stream, Crazy, and I thank you very much for the support. Just for y'all to know, Crazy is actually the Discord moderator. He's the arbiter on our Discord server. So just in case y'all didn't know that, that was funny to me. He could have just sent me a Discord message, but he sent it in super chat. So thank you once again for the support, Crazy, and we will play War Thunder after the stream. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Suzanne B, who says, "Grill spam and cheese sandwich." And Suzanne, I know you sent that in just for my benefit. What, are you crazy or something?
Well, I thank you very much for giving me all the good food. Grilled cheese and spam, like the grilled cheese sandwich on its own and a spam sandwich on its own is pretty good, but a grilled cheese and spam sandwich, we're killing it now. I thank you so much for the support, and I'm going to make sure to have myself some of that good stuff after the stream. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Sampo Sorella, who says, "I think that Ukraine ordered complete social media blackout to the troops pushing at Kherson and hope the same from the civilians."
I believe that may be true. I think that may be the reason why we're not getting a lot of news out of the Kherson area, although we do know they're heavily pushing that counterattack still. So that may explain it, but I haven't heard about that, so I can't confirm it or deny it. But that would be a great explanation as to why we don't get a lot of news out of there anymore. And with that, I thank you very much for the support and providing that little bit of a little tidbit of info to us. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 donation from Anthony, who says, "Are there any separatist movement in Kaliningrad Oblast for independence?"
Any separatist movements in the Kaliningrad Oblast? As far as I know, no. Also, a lot of people took the word on the Kaliningrad referendum that happened a while ago, where they stated overwhelmingly that they wanted independence from Russia, as true, but it was found out later on that that whole entire vote was faked by the Ukrainians, and they used it to show how the Russians can just fake their elections and their polls and such things like that, and how most people will just believe it at face value as being what it is. So that was actually a pretty interesting thing to me, and with that in mind, and also considering the lack of news we've gotten of any partisan activities at all in Kaliningrad, I don't think anything like that is happening there. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from LG, a $5 super chat, I almost said the other thing, from Max, and let me make sure I'm not missing any here. Then we have several $3 donations. We have one from Anthony, Raquel8, Junebug, and Zach Jeffers. And one more double check to make sure I hadn't missed anybody here. And then a $2 donation from B. Dobson. So thank you very much to all of you for your support. They don't leave comments, but we appreciate the support nonetheless. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Diffuse56, who says, "I'm going AFK around midnight. I gotta work early. Great work tonight. And by the way, Starsky said one of his educational and dryly witty vids today. I definitely recommend."
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And of course, Operator Starsky has been a good friend of this channel and also been on here multiple times helping us to push the Sunday fundraisers. And I do thank you very much for the support and also being a viewer of Operator Starsky's as well. We have a lot of, I guess you could say, cross-group viewers that come from Starsky's channel and then came over here and started watching our channel after he came on. And if you're one of those people, welcome on board. You've been here probably for a while now, but I do thank you so much for the support. And I hope that does address the comment in a way. And I will check out his video. I haven't checked it out yet today, but I usually try and watch all the videos he uploads. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Eduardo Gonzalez, who says, "I'm beginning to get the feeling that the US and Europe are dragging their feet on the war. I understand the consequences of NATO getting involved, but it's time to send the hate and discontent to end the war."
That is, could you reread that one real quick for me? Because I think I may have mixed it up there in my head.
So Eduardo says, "I am beginning to get the feeling that the US and Europe are dragging their feet on the war. I understand the consequences of NATO getting involved, but it's time to send the hate and discontent to end the war."
I thank you very much for the support, but I don't think at this point, while I do understand the emotional sentiments, I don't think it's actually a smart idea for us to get directly involved. Getting directly involved will probably entail a nuclear war almost instantly because the Russians will be put on the back foot within days. So with that in mind, I do know where you're coming from. No, don't get me wrong with that. But at the same time, I would be pretty leery about what the Russians would do once they started to lose terribly, because that would be the end result of us joining into a war. They would literally just nuke us. Because while their military is third world at best, maybe even fourth or fifth world, if there is even such a thing, we'll have to make a new category for them. Their nuclear arsenal is first world still, at least in numbers. We don't know how many are still operational, but at least in the overall figure, they would be able to obliterate the entire Western world with their nuclear weapons almost 3 or 4 times over. So with that, I hope that does address the question, and I thank you very much for the support. But at this moment, I'm not really sure if we want to get in a war because of that reason. Also, I highly recommend, again, if you want a really realistic portrayal of what a nuclear war would look like and what the aftermath would be, I'm usually not one to send people to movies because I think they're largely inaccurate. Like, I remember I had a history teacher who would sit there and be like, "Oh, you want to know what the Revolutionary War was like? Go watch The Patriot." Or you want to know what Roman life was like? Go watch The Gladiator. Don't ever do that. But there's one movie out there that perfectly portrayed what nuclear war would look like in the aftermath of it, and that movie was Threads. If you've never seen it, Go watch it. It pretty much shows you in pretty much a pseudo-documentary style what the aftermath of nuclear war would look like, and it does a very good job at it. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, I'm going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Rotormax, who does not leave a comment. And Rotormax, thank you very, very much for that support. We appreciate you as always. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Devin Betterton again, who says, just another donation to show some love for the cause.
And I thank you very much for the support. We're actually going to put a pause. 1 second. Oh, man. We're going to put a little pause on this quiz here so I can answer that. I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy our channel a lot. I know that means a lot to Matthew and me, because while I always say it means a lot to me, I know it means a lot to Matthew as well, because both of us work as hard as we can on this stream to make sure that it is something that people can get on and enjoy to watch. There's a lot of streams out there that don't really regulate what... Well, that kind of comes off wrong, but it pretty much is what it is. A lot of streams out there don't really regulate what comes on to their live chat rather than, like, you know, cam bots and stuff like that, which we do. And so you have a lot of Russian trolls and bots that go in there and just harass people and try and stir up fights, and then people hop out and leave because, you know, every time you go in there, it's almost like getting into a brawl and you can hardly watch the show. So I thank you very much for enjoying it, because Matthew on that end makes sure to put these streams on lockdown, and we make sure that there's no like loony people from any direction, whether they be communist, fascist, pro-Russian, or whatnot, coming in here and just trying to stir up trouble and make it an unenjoyable stream. So I thank you very much for enjoying it, and I thank you very much for appreciating what we do to make this news come through every single day. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you very much for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Al Ani Anas, who says, I wish Sweden would give Ukraine 15.5 centimeter band cannon, 1 inch, 15 rounds of 155 millimeter in 45 seconds.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I do know what you're talking about. I don't know if the Swedes still use this. This is actually retired in 2003. I don't know how... There was only 26 of these built as well, and I think you may be a War Thunder player, because this tank was actually added fairly newly into the game, but the band cannon was a pretty impressive SPG. It uses a 155 millimeter shell. I don't believe it's the same length of shell that the NATO standard is, but still, it's a 155 millimeter shell, and this thing had a pretty fast reload time of around, I believe, 3.5 seconds or even less. I think it got around to 3 or 2.7 seconds, but it was an incredibly capable SPG in terms of its reload speed, but I'm not sure about the range of it. We'll check that out, though, real quick. Secondary armament, it doesn't tell us the range, which is very unfortunate, sadly. But still, there was 26 of them built. I don't know if they still exist, but we can see one here at the military museum. So by and large, considering that there's already one in the military museum, I don't think a lot of them still exist in operational condition, but I do thank you for the support, and that is something that the Swedes might be able to consider, but I think they would most likely send something that's currently in their military inventory instead of not. But I do thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, I'm going to do this at the request of a viewer who's been asking me multiple times. Yeehaw! And we're moving on to the next super chat. We have a $4 donation from Fuzz the Cat, who says, in the park/lake perspective of the mall bombing, you could see the shockwave disrupt across the surface of the water. I hope all of this ends soon.
I do agree as well. It's something terrible when you think about it. I mean, the hell that these poor citizens are living through. I don't really call them civilians because I feel like that's such a overused and cliche word these days. I use citizens, but I do feel for all the citizens of Ukraine that have to live through this kind of stuff every single day. It's wrong. It's completely wrong. These poor people are just trying to live their lives. They pose no threat to the Russian military, and yet they go and single them out and target them specifically, pretty much, to try and kill off as many as possible. It's almost like genocide, really, and they're trying to perpetrate it as an accident, but the way they target these buildings or these places, and they always just by coincidence have the most people at them, it's almost like they're trying to kill them. And I have to say that it's just sickening to think that that's happened again in Kremenchuk, and I think it finally needs to come to an end once and for all. We either need to ramp up the amount of weapons we're sending over to Ukraine, or completely cut the Russians out, like selling oil and such things like that, which is their last bit of income.
No, Enforcer, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Oh, shit, we've been DDoSed.
Is the stream down?
It's not down. Well, yeah, it looks like it's down all the way. You see, that's why it's
Oh.
a DDoS attack, because we're still talking fine. But it's now saying that my stream's running fine. It's saying that we have excellent connection. Now it's saying we have no data. I don't know. It looks like it's returning back to normal. 1 second. Let's see if it will. It's all over the place right now, but we may be going back.
I think it might pop back up.
It might be popping back up. It's now popped over to OBS, so they're seeing what I'm seeing. But man, something's throttling our connection. Just for y'all to know, just in case if y'all can still hear me. I don't know if y'all can, but we actually gave priority to the OBS studio. So regardless of whatever's running on this computer, this OBS software will be given priority. So the stream is hopefully still running. It sounds like they can still hear us. And it does show green in the corner, so it is saying that the connection is decent. So run a poll real quick to see if everyone can hear us. And they can.
So I'm getting a 98% return on yes, they can hear us.
Okay, so it looks like right now, here's what we know. We have a VPN running. We also have given priority to the OBS system. So that way, if our servers are being uploaded, everything will go offline before the stream does. So it looks like it's just carrying us through just by a hair. But once again, I've got to say this. A lot of people are saying that it's our internet connection. That's not true. Matthew and me were just able to talk to each other perfectly fine while our stream almost went through the floor. So I know for certain that it's not our internet connection. It is a DDoS attack that we're going through right now. And somehow, we're just irking it out by the skin of our teeth, and this thing isn't going down. So thank God it's not. And thank God that everything we've done so far has been able to keep us alive. Yes! Dude, we finally did it. We've been DDoS attacked, and we survived it.
Yes, and the viewers could hear everything we were saying while we thought we were offline, so they got to hear that wonderful behind-the-scenes look at what happens when we're taken offline.
But with that, could you reread the question that I was answering if I was answering one, and if I wasn't, we'll move on to the next question.
So let me see if I can find that one to weed it real quick. Let's see. I think the question was answered, and because I have gone ahead and marked it as read.
Interesting. And so hopefully with that, we've answered the question. If we didn't, I'm very... Well, actually reread it just to make sure I answered it.
Let's see. I really can't find it.
Oh, okay. Well, with that, I'm terribly sorry if we didn't answer the question. I hope you do understand. But I do thank you very much for the support. And it does help us to continue running this channel, even through DDoS attacks. And we finally survived! We did it! We finally did it. We found a way to survive the DDoS attacks. So right now, the stream is returned back to normal. I'm so happy about that, y'all, because that means I don't have to worry about that ever again. But with that, thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Eduardo Gonzalez again, who says, by the way, thanks for the Enforcer coffee mug. I use it every day. It starts many conversations at the unit.
And I thank you so much for the support. And the unit? What is he, in the military? With an Enforcer mug? That is really cool. That is really cool, man. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You ought to tell everyone in your unit to subscribe to the channel, because if you do enjoy it, maybe they enjoy it too. But I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that you do take the coffee mug to work, and a lot of people see it, and that is really cool. And speaking of which, if you are in the U.S. military, did he send that super chat in dollars or another currency?
I'm not sure.
If it was in dollars, you would be an American and in the American military. And just like the American military and how we usually always win, we just finally won over a DDoS attack. Man, I feel good. We finally won. They'll probably give up now, or they'll probably try and do that again. But golly, we finally did it. I'm so glad about this. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope you do continue to enjoy drinking out of that mug. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $4 super chat from Marc-Andre Brunette, who says, you guys are doing an incredible job. I support you all the way from Montreal, Canada.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy these streams, because now they'll probably never go down again, because we finally protected ourselves against a DDoS attack. But did he say Montreal?
Yes.
We've always wanted to go to Montreal in Quebec. or wait a minute, as Quebec, I'm sorry, let me say Quebec, that's actually the right way to pronounce it. But we've always wanted to go to Montreal and Quebec because that's about the closest thing you can get to France without going to France. But I do thank you very much for the support, and it is really cool to hear that you are from Montreal, which looks like the city of islands, actually. There's an island here, an island here, and then, you know, there's a little bit of cities on the banks, but wow, that's really cool. I never actually looked at the lay of the land in Montreal. But with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And Slava the Lee Spring Army, as we just made it through our first one. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And just so everybody knows, we just have 2 more super chats to get to, and then we're going to get to all of the multiple live chat questions that we have. So up next, we have a $5 super chat from BSG Wolf, who says, how serious is the danger of Russia actually attacking Lithuania over Kaliningrad?
In my opinion, this is once again just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt, but my opinion is that it's probably incredibly low. It is a member of NATO, and NATO has made a pretty strong stance against the Russians within their own territory, and so an attack on Lithuania would incur a wrath of the Western world, and I don't think the Russians are ready for that, and I think they know they're not ready for that, you know, behind closed doors. So in my opinion, and take it with a grain of salt, because this is just my opinion, you know, so they could be wrong, I don't think they'll attack Lithuania for that reason. But with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $25 super chat from Brian Cave, who does not leave a comment. So thank you very much, Brian. Very generous of you. And we appreciate your support of the channel. And we appreciate you watching as well. And for our final super chat of the night, and let me make sure this is the last one. Yes, this is the last one of the night. We have a $2 super chat from Agent Pepsi, who says, Russians will learn only once Moscow sees damage.
I think that may be true. They already have seen a little bit of damage, though. We know the skyscraper caught on fire in Moscow due to some sabotage attacks, and a lot of stuff in the outskirts, like in Zhukovsky, which is somewhere around here, right here, Zhukovsky. We know that a ballistic missiles office and development center was burned to the ground as well. So there has been some damage directly to Moscow, but I do know what you're saying, and I don't think the West will give the Ukraine the weapons to do such a thing, but I do think that that may be somewhat true, in my opinion. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we have gotten through every super chat tonight, and we survived a DDoS attack. I'm so happy about that. Like, y'all don't know how ecstatic I am about that, because now I am stress-free. I don't have to worry about this thing going down again, because now it looks like it's going to be unbeatable. We finally strengthened our defenses to the point we could survive. And so with that, thank you all so much for the support once again. It helps our channel to keep running, and it helps us to survive DDoS attacks just like that one. And so with that, we're now going to move on to answer as many live chat questions as possible, and we're most likely going to continue answering them for around the next 12 minutes, so as many as we can cover. And with that, we are now on to our first live chat question.
And our first live chat question is from Olivia McCarthy, who says, Enforcer, Ukraine seems to be trading territory for time. Do you think that fighting until the last man until more weapon systems arrive is a good idea, or does Ukraine need to change its tactics?
I think that the tactics they're using right now are pretty solid. It is a defensive war after all, and having an elastic defense in a modern defensive war is a solid strategy. While it does always look like, well, it doesn't always look like it, but it sometimes look like they're losing. In terms of the amount of damage they're inflicting on the invading forces, they are winning, because the, you know, losses versus the gain isn't really reflective of each other. And so in that regard, I feel like their defensive strategy is winning, and it is buying them time, and that's the whole entire thing at the onset of the defensive war, is to buy yourself time and destroy as much of the enemy as possible, and then start counterattacks and try and push them out. At this point, though, I feel like this war is going to be incredibly long. It may span well into next year. But still, as long as it's to the Ukrainians' advantage to do that, it just has to be what it is. You know, it is a war after all. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from EM Dash, who says, Enforcer, you correctly assessed the Russian military weakness, contrary to the general opinion. So what is your assessment of China's military?
China's military, much like Russia's, is a paper tiger. They don't have the military budget. While it's larger than the Russians, and I will give them that, it's still not large enough to actually field a comparable military to the United States. Taiwan, however, may be a different story, but to the United States, it's not comparable. We'll go over the figures here, actually. Chinese, well, actually, we'll type in People's Liberation Army. Liberation Military. Let's see if we can just pull up the whole military. People's Liberation... Oh, let's just type in the Chinese military. Chinese military. And hopefully we can just get some quick information on this. So the whole thing is called the People's Liberation Army. Very creative on their end. I guess that includes People's Liberation Navy, the People's Liberation Army Air Force, amongst others. Yeah, look at this. This is so stupid. The whole entire thing is called the People's Liberation Army. So the whole, and as you know, in the English term, army means a ground force. You know, like the army. You know, the guys that are on the ground in Ukraine. But in the People's Liberation Army, they have the People's Liberation Ground Force, not the Army, it's the Ground Force. The People's Liberation Army Navy, the People's Liberation Army Air Force. Look, it literally says that too. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, and then the People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force. What a mouthful. Also, look, they have the same symbol as the Space Force. It's like the universal sign for space exploration and such. But anyways, to answer that question, let's go down here and let's look at their funding, if we can find that. There's their structure. There's their theaters of command. Usually every country divides up their command structure. So interesting to see theirs. The western area, of course, is large because no one lives there. We'll scroll down a little bit further. Here we can see their newest tank, the Type 99A, which is, of course, just the improved Type 99. So, you know, it's like, is the reliability of this thing good? And it seems really questionable. So we'll just leave it at that. We can see, of course, the Chengdu J-20, which everyone acts like is China's, you know, main fighter aircraft, but there's not a lot of them, as far as I know. We'll actually get a number on that. 50 in service as of 2021. Just to put in perspective, I think we have around 400 F-22s. Let me pull that up. F-22. And let me make sure, I don't want to say anything wrong. We have 195 of them. 187 of them are operational aircraft. And so in that figure, we outdo the Chinese by a pretty good margin just in F-22s alone. I'm just going to be honest with you, without going into the numbers and just giving you a general overview of what I know about the Chinese. They've been in the process of modernizing, but they're not there yet. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief. Don't want to make it too long. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and we have had 2 more super chats come in, so we're going to jump to those real quick. We have a $20 super chat from Tito McLovin, who says, I love this channel. One way to defend yourself against cyber attacks would be to educate yourselves with security, plus, and CISSP courses, or hire a reliable cybersecurity staff. A VPN, antivirus, or firewall is not enough.
I'm going to stop you right there, bud, because whatever we did tonight saved us for now. That might change. We might actually get DDoSed and taken down sometime around. But tonight, we survived, and I'm more than happy to say that, and I can't believe it, honestly. I'm floored. I didn't think it would work. I thought we had actually gone down for good right then, and we were about to have to try and start up the stream again. But, oh my god, it lived. I couldn't believe it, but I do thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one. But I do know what you're saying, and we may look into that if problems do persist after tonight. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Miroslav Kostic, who says, congrats, you guys are indestructible. War should stop and get the somehow agreement.
I do think the war should stop, but I don't think it should stop at the expense of Ukraine losing more territory. That's going to be rough on them, and on top of that, that's going to embolden the Russians to maybe try again in a few years. Just remember, they did get a peace agreement with the Chechens, and that didn't stop them from starting a second Chechen war just around 7 or 8 years later. So in that, I do know what you're saying, but I don't believe the war should be stopped now at any cost, because that could, of course, incur Ukraine pretty much losing in the end and having to give up sizable tracts of land, which was the Russians' goal. And so with that, I thank you very much for, well, not really the Russians' initial goal, but at this point, that's what they're saying. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you so much, well, not the support, I thank you very much again for the good question. And with that, we're on to the next one, now that I butchered that outro right there.
And that actually was support. And thank you very much for your super chat.
Oh.
So moving, so moving on, we are going to get back to our live chat questions. Don't worry, folks. I just told a viewer a minute ago that his question was next, and we are getting to that next. But we have to address one more super chat. This one is from H2O Berry Matt 1, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Pizza, as long as it's thin crust and company party kitty. LOL. Keep it up. Good work."
Well, thank you very much for the support. I don't know what the company party kitty means, but I do thank you for the pizza as long as it's thin crust. Matthew and me can agree. Pepperoni pizza on thin crust is like a cracker. It's delicious. It's really good. Like, of course, it can wear itself out if you eat it too much, but it is a really, really good way to eat a pizza, and I agree with you. Thin crust is pretty good. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and the next one up is from Mick Ranger from the live chat, who says, "What do you think about Ukraine getting some hovercrafts? I think that type of equipment would be very useful."
Hovercraft. I don't know which hovercraft he's talking about. I don't know if he's talking about like the flying car kind of hovercraft or the hovercraft that's used in the Navy.
Probably that big thing that lives in the Navy.
Lives in the Navy. It's a living thing. It's like from the movie Cars. It's got like a
It's like a
sentient
scuba.
Yeah. To answer that question, that would be cool for them to get them. But at the same time, I don't know how they would use them effectively because they're pretty much just large transport vehicles that can actually float, like pretty much shore themselves onto the beach. I don't know if they would actually be able to use those though because they don't have a Navy to support them with, and usually those are used with a Navy to back them up, and the Ukrainians don't have one. So while they would be cool, I'm not really sure if they would be effective. So I thank you very much for the support. That's just my opinion though. Take it with a grain of salt. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from JF, who says, "Enforcer, this is a question from Down Under. Do you consider the NATO intervention in Kosovo in 1999 might become the precedent for this war? If so, we may be nearly there."
I don't think that it's going to. I don't think it's going to come to that because that was a neutral country that didn't really have any backing from anyone, that just split into multiple pieces. And so we were able to go in there just fine. And then the Russians also went there as well, and we got into some scuffles with them here and there in the middle of the former Yugoslavia. So I don't think it's going to come to that because unlike that situation where it's a country that's fallen apart, Ukraine is a sovereign country that the Russians are fighting directly against. And so us going in there would pretty much be joining the side of the Ukrainians and joining the war with them, which would lead to a world war. So I don't necessarily think it's going to go that way, but I do see where you're coming from nonetheless. So take my opinion with a grain of salt. That's what I'm thinking, but it could go in that direction, although I don't see it heading that way anytime soon. So I thank you very much for this, for the question. I hope that does answer it. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and next, whoa, hold on just a minute. Gotta destroy a bot real quick. There we go.
Where was it?
Up next, we have, oh, it's right there. It's Master Carl.
Let's see.
Master Carl is gone.
Trying to find him. I can't find him.
I already got rid of him so quick you couldn't even find him.
Man, disappeared like that, like lightning. Matthew's fast with that. You see, he pulls out the 45 Colt and they're gone. But with that, we're on to the next question.
And it is actually a Stugna, to be fair. Right, Enforcer?
It is. It is a Stugna. And with that,
yes,
we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Archangel, who says, "Enforcer, how many nuke subs does Russia have?"
Ooh, that's a tough one to answer. Let's pull that up. Russian nuclear sub fleet. I don't actually have a straight up answer to that. I know y'all watch me fill out the quizzes every once in a while, which I drop to make sure I can answer questions right now. And so I know y'all see me doing that and I get a decent amount of the stuff right, but at the same time, I don't know everything. So, how many nuclear subs does Russia have? 10 nuclear-powered armed ballistic missile submarines. Wow, only 10. Only 10. American nuclear sub fleet. We have more than 70. Dang. Wow, that's sad. They've only got 10 of them. So there's your answer, 10. With that, I hope that answers the question. And we're going to answer one more question from the chat because it's about to turn 12:30 Eastern time. And after we answer that question, we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. And so who is the lucky last person who got in a question for the night?
So, the lucky last person of the night, take a stab at who it is, folks. It's Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, which U.S. companies refuse to stop supporting Russia and continue to take profits at the expense of Ukrainian lives?
Nestle is one. I don't think that comes as a shock to anyone. But beyond Nestle, I can't really think of any others. There are some out there, though. I think, not speaking of American companies, but I believe that British Petroleum, which everyone in the South hates, it still conducts business in Russia, just in case y'all didn't know. BP was actually the ones that operated the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that exploded off the coast of Louisiana, and then the entire Gulf Coast was coated in a nice slick of oil, and it washed up on the shores of everywhere down here in the Gulf, which led to all of the seafood being contaminated and all of the beaches being covered in oil. It was a massive ordeal, pissed everyone off down here. And after that, BP died here in the South. You can hardly find a BP gas station anywhere around here, and that's because no one would dare buy BP oil because they pretty much screwed over the Gulf Coast, which everyone in the South prides themselves on. So, with that, I think that's a British company that's still operating within Russia, which is no surprise to me. Glad we kicked them out years ago here in the South. But Nestle is an American company that's still over there and operating in Russia as far as I know. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we have now reached the end of this stream. The Lee Spring Army survived the first DDoS attack that we were ever able to live through, which blew my mind. I'm so happy. I'm just honestly so freaking happy that we were able to do that, because that lets me know that that may be the end of our troubles there. It was a short, turbulent time from day 116 to day 123, but it looks like we finally overcame that hurdle today, and it looks like we'll be okay from here on. I thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have enjoyed tonight's news, and I thank you all so much for asking those very interesting questions, and also giving us the support to continue to keep this channel running. I thank you all once again, and with that, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the Ukraine war news on day 126. I thank you all once again, and I will see you all tomorrow. Good night, and take care.
Not